Good morning, my friends. Happy, what is today? Thursday. Are you losing track of the days? I know I am. Hey, I do want to say something while I'm waiting for everybody to get on here. Should be getting some people soon, I hope. Let me know if you're here. Where are my people? Ah, there's somebody I got to like. Good morning. Hey, oh, Catherine, you're always right on time. I love that about you. You're my favorite today. I did want to say something. So yesterday, as I was talking right in the middle of our recording, everything went dark. Hopefully that won't happen again, but if it does, hi Beth, hi from Wisconsin. If that were to happen again, if our reading was to get cut short in the middle, know that I would get back online as quickly as possible. So just hang in there and I will pick up where we left off just as fast as I can, okay? So this morning's digital resource was suggested by oh gosh, now I can't remember who suggested it, but I thought it was really great. And look up in the show notes. It is a virtual tour of the New York Botanical Gardens Orchid Show. It's really cool. It's really beautiful. And you should watch it full screen. So make it fill up your whole computer screen. It looks really great. All right, my friends, let's get reading. Today we are reading chapters 10 and 11 of A Single Thread. We left poor Evelyn in pretty bad straits yesterday, but we're actually going to be opening up with, excuse me, my throat's a little dry. Chapter 10 belongs to Abigail Burgess Wynn. Are you ready? Here we go. Excuse me, I asked, certain that I must have heard her wrong. You're going to get a what? Liza had broken with tradition by actually joining me at the breakfast table instead of pouring herself a cup of black coffee and going back to her room to drink it, stared at me over the edge of her cup. A tattoo, she said. An inky ribbon of black eyeliner made her large brown eyes look even larger. She blinked them innocently, but was unable to completely conceal her pleasure at my horrified reaction. The corner of her mouth twitched, threatening to split her lips into a smile as she went on. Nothing too elaborate, not a drawing or anything, just 2 words, Lady Burgess, right here, she said, taking one finger and tracing an imaginary line from her jawline to her collarbone to indicate the proposed tattoo's placement. In black Gothic lettering, I spoke with a tattoo artist and picked out my design yesterday. My appointment is next week. It's my birthday present to myself. It's going to be incredible, very striking. My stomach felt queasy, like I'd been poised at the top of a gigantic roller coaster that had suddenly taken a precipitous drop. You can't be serious. Liza was grinning openly now, not even trying to disguise her delight over my distress. Of course I am. It's no big deal, Aunt Abigail. Everybody gets tattoos these days. And besides, it's my body, she declared. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want with it, and there really isn't anything you can do about it. She was right. For the 100th time, I mentally cursed Harry Golden. He'd foisted the responsibility for this delinquent monster of a girl onto me. Then he'd failed to provide me with any effective means of controlling her out-of-control behavior. If she'd been my daughter, I'd have threatened to ground her or eject her from my house or my will or something. But she wasn't. And what's more, no matter how immature her behavior was, she was right. She was of age. If she was determined to get a tattoo, and the steely glint in her eye told me she was, there was very little I could do to stop her, even if the tattoo she mentioned she was determined to get was purposely designed to besmirch our family name and heap as much personal humiliation upon me as possible. I remembered what I'd said to Franklin that day in the restaurant, my not quite joking declaration that I would not negotiate with a terrorist. Today, it was even less funny than it had been at the time, because as far as I was concerned, that's what I was dealing with, a terrorist, or at least a blackmailer. If I didn't negotiate with her, there was no question in my mind that she would do exactly as she had threatened. She'd parade up and down the streets of New Bern in her horrible ripped jeans and tight black t-shirts with an enormous, hideously lettered tattoo that shouted our kinship emblazoned on her neck. Her neck! Liza stared at me, and I stared back. I blinked first. That's right, it's your birthday next week. I tried to keep my tone casual. Of course you can get a tattoo, if that's what you really want. You've such a pretty neck, Liza. It was true. Her neck was thin and elegant, a long, slender arc of white flesh that bowed gracefully from her jawline to her collarbone, a ballerina's neck. Those tattoos are permanent, aren't they? What if the design doesn't turn out as well as you'd hoped? Or if the artist, it nearly choked me to apply that word to this situation, but if I had a chance at preventing this disaster, I knew I had to deal with Liza on her terms, makes some kind of mistake. Delilah is a famous tattoo artist. She doesn't make mistakes. That echo of a smile returned to Liza's lips, but she didn't blink. She knew the game we were playing, and she knew that she was winning. Still, it would be a shame if it didn't turn out as you'd imagined, and there it would be, on your neck, forever. I paused. Liza said nothing. Maybe there's something you'd like more than a tattoo? A cashmere sweater, legally obtained this time, a car, the Hope Diamond. She only had to name her price, and I'd pay it. Anything to keep my name, our name, from being immortalized in ink by a tattoo artist named Delilah. If you can think of another birthday present you'd like in exchange for that tattoo, I'd be happy to get it for you. I was planning on getting you a present. A lie, and we both knew it. Liza's eyes were triumphant. She had me where she wanted me, up against the ropes of social conformity. As a matter of fact, I did have something in mind. Of course she did. I'd known it from the beginning. She reached into the back pocket of her jeans and pulled out a folded up piece of newsprint. At first, I was sure it was an advertisement, maybe for a computer or the latest cell phone or even a car. But when she unfolded the paper and handed it to me, all I saw was a picture of a middle-aged woman, slender, with blue eyes and straight, sandy hair cut in an angled bob that mirrored the slant of her jaw. She wore a black sweater and trim blue jeans with chunky silver and turquoise earrings. A black, purple, and teal paisley shawl was draped over her shoulder, giving her a vaguely bohemian look, as if she'd once taught high school art classes. Now the woman obviously was involved in some sort of retail venture. She was standing in front of the old Fielding drugstore. Dolly Chesterton had said that some woman from Texas had taken out a lease on the place, but I couldn't recall the details. This must be her. Well, she'd certainly done a good job with the remodeling of the shop. The panes of the bow front window were new and shining, but she'd been smart enough to retain the old woodwork, so the storefront kept the look and feel of an antique apothecary shop. She'd added another layer of crown molding around the door frame to give it a more elegant appearance. The frame was painted black, and the sheen of it told me she'd used an oil-based paint, certainly an extra expense, but the smooth, shining finish was worth it. The door itself was painted a vivid red that exactly matched the color of the potted geraniums on either side of the door. It was a charming effect. The door of the shop couldn't have looked any more welcoming. Clearly, the owner of New Bern's newest boutique had style, taste, and an eye for color. Either that or she knew enough to hire someone with those qualities. What was this place, I wondered? A clothing store? In such an off-the-beaten-path location? Surely not. Perhaps an interior design studio. Well, I wasn't exactly keen on the idea of Liza redecorating my guest room. Heaven knew what the girl would want. Black wallpaper with white skulls, probably. But if the tasteful woman in the newspaper photograph was in charge of the design, it couldn't be that bad. And even if it was, better skulls and crossbones in a back bedroom hidden from the eyes of the neighbors than Lady Burgess on Liza's neck, where everyone in New Bern would see it. It looks like a very nice shop. I'd been thinking to myself that your room could do with a bit of updating. I lied again. It was starting to become a habit. New paint, wallpaper, drapes, whatever you'd like to make it reflect your own personality. How much do you think you'll need? I pushed the newspaper across the table and started to get up so I could retrieve my pocketbook from the antique sideboard, but Liza interrupted. "The story," she said flatly. "You have to read it." The smile on her face faded as she handed the newspaper back to me. I felt a strange prickling on the back of my head, as if a migraine were about to come on. I retrieved my reading glasses that always hung on the chain around my neck and put them on and began reading. New Bern's newest entrepreneur is fighting the odds. Evelyn Dixon, the owner of New Bern's newest business, Cobbled Court Quilts, isn't one to shy away from a challenge. When she first saw the long-abandoned Fielding Drug Emporium during a vacation to New England last year, she knew it would take time, money, and vision to renovate the old building and turn it into a sustainable retail venture. And while she had plenty of vision, time and money were in shorter supply. Plenty of people, from friends and family to financiers and fabric vendors, doubted that Cobbled Court Quilts would ever open its doors. Dixon admits they had reason to doubt. Looking back, the Wisconsin native says, with the tiniest trace of a twang picked up during 20 years residence in Texas, it's probably a good thing that I underestimated just what it would take to get my business underway. If I hadn't, I'm not sure I'd have taken the risk. But now that we're open, I'm glad I did. I love New Bern, and I love running this shop. And it's clear that the quilters love Cobbled Court Quilts and its spunky owner. One of the Cobbled Court's customers, Dominique Martin, who dropped by to ask Evelyn to guide her through the delicate process of joining the points of an 8-pointed star, said, "There are so many beautiful fabrics to choose from. It really gets my creative juices flowing. And Evelyn is a wonderful teacher. When she first suggested this pattern, I thought she was crazy. Now that it's almost done, I have to admit I feel really proud of myself, but I could never have done it without Evelyn. She's an inspiration." Dixon waves off such effusive praise, noting that collaboration and cooperation have always been part of the quilting tradition. Quilting is more than just sewing and even more than just creating a piece of beautiful, usable art. Since our great-grandmother's time, quilters have always created community. Quilting is about getting together and helping each other, sharing life, cheering one another on through good times and bad. And it's that desire to encourage others that is leading Evelyn Dixon to pick up her sewing needle and get into another tough fight, the fight against breast cancer. On Saturday, September 20th, Cobbled Court Quilts will host a Quilt Pink event, joining with hundreds of other quilt shops and thousands of quilters around the country as they quilt for a cure. Each participant sewing individual quilt blocks that will be joined into a larger quilt. When completed, each quilt will be auctioned off and the money donated. Quilt Pink, September 20th, breast cancer. I didn't have to read more. I knew what Liza wanted. When I looked up from the paper, Liza's eyes were dry, but there was a rippling movement under the perfect, unblemished skin of her throat that showed she was swallowing back tears. "What do you think? Does it ring any bells for you?" she asked. When I read it, I figured it had to be some kind of omen. So that's it. That's what I want. On September 20th, the anniversary of the day my mother died from breast cancer, you come to the quilt shop with me and make one of those blocks. I opened my mouth to speak, but Liza interrupted me. "And don't even bother to suggest that you make some big donation instead. You have to go yourself in person, and I'm coming to watch you do it. It's time you finally did something besides writing a check." Finally, she blinked as if waiting for me to say something, but there was nothing to say. "That's the deal," she said. "Otherwise, I'm getting that tattoo." "All right, I'll go." "Good," Liza said, but not convincingly. I got the feeling that she'd have preferred if I'd argued, giving her an excuse to fight with me, but I wasn't about to do so. Liza took a final drink of the now cold coffee, pushed back her chair, and headed toward the back door. "By the way, the quilting thing is from my mother. You still owe me a birthday present. I want $350. You were right. My room needs redecorating." She let the screen door slam behind her as she stomped down the back porch and walked around the side of the house, not bothering to say where she was going or when she'd be back. I dropped my head into my hands and rubbed my eyes. I'd been right. It was a nightmare. That is chapter 10. Let me get a little sip before we go on to chapter 11. Are we all enjoying it? I hope so, gang. Are we ready? Chapter 11, Evelyn Dixon. When I was 9 years old, my family got our first color television set, a 23-inch Motorola encased in a French provincial wood cabinet. Never mind that the rest of our furniture was early American. We were thrilled to have that giant screen dominating our living room. The first program we watched on it was the Rose Parade, live from Pasadena. When it was over, I nagged my poor mother until she drove me to Miss Yolanda's School of Baton and enrolled me as a member of the American Sweethearts twirling team. For 4 years, Mother and Dad plunked down $12 a month for twirling lessons and more for the star-spangled swimsuit and white go-go boots that were our uniform for parades and competitions. I never won a trophy, and I never marched in the Rose Parade, but I did learn to smile. Miss Yolanda was a stickler for smiling. No matter what happened, you had to keep smiling. If you dropped your baton, smile. If another girl dropped her baton and it hit you in the head, smile. If the Sweethearts Parade placement was right behind the Happy Hooves Riding Club and you stepped in horse dung right up to the tops of your white go-go boots, smile. The instant you pick up that baton, Miss Yolanda would say, addressing rows of sweethearts with the gravity of a military commander giving a final briefing to the troops heading into battle, I want to see a smile on your face, just like your fingers and your baton are two ends of a live wire, and the second they meet, zap, your face lights up. Like flipping a switch. Don't think, just smile. I hadn't thought about Miss Yolanda for years, but for some reason, upon waking from the fitful 3 hours of sleep that was all I'd been able to manage after my appointment at Dr. Thayer's, her voice was loud and clear in my head. Smile, she commanded, and I did. As I unlocked the door and greeted the group of quilters already clustered in the courtyard, as I served coffee and Charlie's cake and handed out goodie bags tied with pink ribbons, as I pulled names for door prize winners out of a basket, as I moved from table to table to table of novice quilters, showing them how to trace quarter-inch stitching lines with marking pencils and secure a seam without using knots, as I discussed color choice and applique placement, as I signed up women for new classes, as I rang up sales of fabric, notions, patterns, and quilting books, bagged each purchase, as I thanked customers for coming and waved goodbye when they left, I smiled. I didn't think. I just smiled, going through the motions, breathing, walking, talking, but numb. My emotions and actions didn't connect with my mind or heart. I'd been that way ever since Dr. Thayer pronounced my sentence, cancer. After that, I'd ceased to hear what he was saying, unable to connect the information to myself. He looked at me sympathetically while speaking of options, treatment plans, disease stages, and next steps. I'd nodded at all the correct intervals and declined his invitation to ask more questions. By the time I got up from my chair and left the office, I couldn't remember what any of his words meant, or maybe I just didn't want to. Work was the perfect distraction, the antidote to all the fears that plagued me, the truths I didn't want to acknowledge. By 10 o'clock, the shop was packed. Thank heavens I'd enlisted the help of a half dozen of my regular customers, including Wendy Perkins, who wore her biggest rhinestone glasses for the occasion. Wendy and the others greeted customers, passed out quilt block kits, helped refill the refreshment table, and taught novices the basics of hand quilting. Without them, I'd never have survived the day. At one point, we were so crowded that there were no more available spaces at the sewing tables. I was busy ringing up sales, so Wendy ran around the corner to her real estate office and brought back a couple of folding tables and chairs, while some of the others cleared out space in the storeroom and a back corner where I kept refurbished sewing machines for sale. The day was a blur, but somehow, finally, 5 o'clock came. I thanked Wendy and the other volunteers for their help, giving them each a tote bag filled with charm packs, a pair of new scissors, and a gift certificate for a free class. Evelyn, how sweet, Gwen Talbert exclaimed, but you don't have to give us anything. We all had fun, and it was for such a good cause. Yes, I do. You worked your tails off today. Wendy craned her neck to take a peek at her behind, her panty line prominent through her too tight stretch slacks. Looks like I've still got mine. She snorted a laugh, and the others joined in. Well, thank you all so much. You were just great. Wendy, do you want me to bring those tables and chairs back to your office tonight? No, let it wait till Monday. I'll come over with a truck and get them. I walked them to the door and said goodbye. Finally, the shop was empty, and smiling still, my lips frozen, stretched tight across my mouth, I locked the front door, threw away the crumpled napkins and half-empty punch cups from the refreshment table, and walked through the shop, turning out the lights. As I approached the back storage room, the one Wendy had fitted with one of the folding tables and extra chairs, I heard voices. Oh no, I thought, and my smile faded. I was sure they were all gone. I closed my eyes for a moment before taking a deep breath and entering the room, smiling again. There were 3 women sitting at the table. A teenage girl with bleached blonde hair wearing all black clothing and an angry expression, a tall blonde with her hair swept back into a ponytail who wore a simple pink button-down blouse under a cream-colored sweater, and an older woman with silver white hair and a French twist who was dressed in a tan cashmere sweater and light woolen skirt, very simple and clearly very expensive. A Dolce & Gabbana handbag, obviously new, lay carelessly at her feet. I recognized her as a customer from the grill, one of the regulars. Charlie had told me her name, but I couldn't remember it now. She had a long, elegant neck and a surprisingly taut jawline for a woman of her age, or what I supposed was her age. She might have been 50 or 70. It was hard to tell. But she had been a beauty in her youth, and she still was. But I wondered what she was doing in my shop. Over the years, I've met all manner of quilters. This is the kind of hobby that attracts all kinds of different people. But in my experience, women who could clearly afford to purchase anything their heart desired seldom felt the need to make anything themselves. And if they did, they generally went in for painting or sculpting, things that were considered more art than craft, though I consider quilting both. But that's a subject for another time. What was she doing here? I couldn't quite figure it out. When she looked up from her work, appraising me as I entered the room, I was sure of one thing. She and the teenager were somehow related. They had the same long neck, the same sharp jaw, the same large brown eyes that held the same expression, a look of loss. They tried to conceal it, the older woman with distance and impeccable manners, the teenager with anger and a mutinous stare, but neither mask was entirely convincing. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful as I spied pieces of fabric lying all over the table. They hadn't even finished cutting out their pieces for their blocks, which meant that they would be at least an hour and more like 2 before they were finished, and I could finally lock the doors of the shop and be alone. I'm Evelyn Dixon, the owner. Forgive me for not coming back to say hello before. It's been an awfully busy day. How are you doing here? Do you need any help? Oh, I think you could say that, the tall brunette said with a self-deprecating giggle. At least I know I do. I haven't touched a needle since I made an A-line skirt in my 8th grade home ec class. The teacher gave me a C-. She smiled as she rose from the table and extended her hand. I'm Margeaux Matthews. The older woman smiled as well, lowering her reading glasses before reaching out to take my hand. I'm Abigail Burgess Wynne, she said in a voice that sounded like good wine and old money. Bright and light, but with a smooth finish. It was a voice that revealed nothing. Wynne, that's who she was. Wynne Memorial Library, Wynne Museum. I remembered now. Charlie said she was one of the wealthiest women in the state. And this is Liza Burgess, my niece. She hesitated a moment before declaring this last, as if reluctant to acknowledge their shared bloodline. Nice to meet you. Abigail peered past me. Has everyone else gone? I'm afraid we've arrived late. Yeah, sorry about that, Margeaux said. I'm between jobs, and I had a 3 o'clock phone interview that was supposed to take 15 minutes, but went on for almost an hour. I wasn't late, Liza growled to her aunt. I stood outside the shop for 2 hours waiting for you to show up. Abigail went on, ignoring the girl. You're probably exhausted after such a long day. Perhaps we should just leave this net for now and come back another time. I was about to gratefully agree with her when Liza, whose single utterance up until now had been delivered in a mumble, shouted, No, we have to finish today. That's the deal that we made. If you don't do this today, then it doesn't count. The deal will be off. I mean it. She glowered at her aunt, who glowered right back. Margeaux, clearly as stunned by the girl's outburst as I was, just stood there. That's no problem, I said, trying to get us past the moment. I don't have any plans for the evening. So, you're all new to quilting? They nodded. Well, I'll give you your first lesson. It's easier than it looks. All you're doing is sewing straight lines. But first, I'll give you a few tips on cutting your patterns. A nice-looking block begins with an accurately cut pattern. I showed them how to use a see-through ruler to measure out precisely sized squares and triangles for the main part of the basket. Then how to use a sharp pencil held at a sideways angle to trace carefully around the template for the applique basket handle. It was a lesson I had given a dozen times already that day, and I could have delivered it while sleepwalking, which, in a way, was exactly what I was doing. As in any group of quilters, all the women had different styles, but thankfully all three caught on to the basics quickly. Liza, the younger woman, said very little, but seemed to have a real feel for color and a willingness to take risks. She quietly asked if it would be all right to make her block in a color scheme that was the opposite of everyone else's, using the brown and mocha shades for her basket and doing the background in pink. I said I thought that would be a good idea, thinking it might be interesting to place that one contrasting block in the center of the quilt as an anchor for the rest. Margeaux approached her task with a businesslike attitude, making quick, confident decisions about her color choices and not getting flustered by little errors. I suspected that as time went on, she would be a good all-around quilter, able to master a variety of techniques quickly and always ready to try more challenging pieces, confident in her ability to puzzle out any problems that might arise. Abigail, in spite of giving the impression that she'd rather be anywhere but where she was a stickler for precision. It was a quality I normally would have applauded, but it was definitely causing her to lag behind the other two. I was so tired and my head was pounding. All I wanted was for them to finish their blocks and leave so I could fall into bed and a dreamless sleep. Once the patterns were cut, I showed them how to mark a stitching line with a pencil so they would understand how that was done, but gave them a 1/4-inch masking tape to mark their seams so they would finish more quickly. Margeaux was the first to finish piecing her block. I asked if I could borrow it to demonstrate how to applique on the handle. By then it was nearly dark outside, and I had to turn on the overhead lamps so there would be enough light to work on. My eyes were almost as tired as my body, and I rubbed them and blinked a few times before taking my first stitch, trying to regain focus. All right, are you all watching? They were. The stitch I'm going to teach you is called the blind stitch, because if you do it properly, you should barely be able to see the stitches. Now, in applique, unlike the running stitch we use to piece our blocks, we're going to use a knot, but we'll hide it here in the fold of the fabric. I held the folded fabric strip out so they could see where to place the first stitch. Then I pierced the fabric with the needle while they watched. I don't know how I did it. I've shown that stitch to hundreds of beginners without incident, but somehow or other, when I pushed the needle through the fabric, I ended up driving it deep into the flesh of my finger. Ouch! Damn it! I dropped the block and instinctively put my finger into my mouth. I tasted blood on my tongue, sharp and metallic, like sucking on an old penny. It hurt, but it was far from agony. It certainly wasn't the first time I'd pricked my finger while sewing. Still, tears pooled in my eyes. Margeaux saw them. Evelyn, are you all right? When I didn't answer, she jumped to her feet. Here, give me your hand. Let me see. She took my hand and unfolded my fingers. A bright ruby drop of blood purled on the end of my fingertip. That really must have smarted, she said sympathetically. She reached for a scrap of cast-off fabric and pressed it to my finger to stop the blood. Don't worry, it'll be all right in a minute. But it wasn't all right. It wouldn't be all right in a minute or a month or maybe ever. The words I'd been trying so hard to smother in my mind, cancer, chemo, radiation, drug therapy, survival rates, and mastectomy, boiled to the surface in a confused jumble. My body started to shake involuntarily as the tears came faster and harder. I couldn't keep them back. What am I going to do? What? I'm thousands of miles away from home. I've got nothing. I've got no one. Why is this happening to me? Just when things were finally starting to go right. I can't have cancer, not now. I covered my face with my hands and gave myself up to despair, sobbing until I was dry. Long moments passed, and I finally raised my head to look at the three strangers standing witness to my collapse. Abigail was silent, her face still and unreadable. What little color there was in Liza's cheeks had completely drained away. Her eyes were full of tears, but empty of answers. Only Margeaux moved toward me, reaching out to wrap her arms around me. Turning to her, I whispered, "Please, somebody tell me, what am I going to do?" Oh my goodness. We didn't leave Evelyn in a very good place. I guess that means you all need to come back tomorrow so we can see what happens next. Now remember, many of you have read with me before, but I don't want you to be afraid. I don't always necessarily tie everything up with a big pink bow, but in a Marie Bostwick book, there is always a hopeful ending, because my motto is this: life is hard and fiction doesn't have to be. All right, my friends, some of you have been enjoying the Bible verses I share at the end, and here's what came to my mind today as I was doing my reading in Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. That really hit me today, because I am realizing that now more than ever, I need to take control of my mind, of anxious thoughts, of worries, and to let it be transformed. And so today, I hope you do the same. I look forward to seeing you all here again tomorrow, my friends. Thanks.